The judge's gavel slammed down, silencing the packed courtroom. Margaret Whitmore sat frozen, her face drained of all color as the truth unraveled before everyone's eyes. Angela Johnson stood tall, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Every piece of evidence, every lie exposed for the entire community to see. Margaret had spent years controlling this neighborhood, but in this moment, she realized, she was the one who had lost everything. But what happened next left the entire courtroom stunned. And trust me, you won't see this coming. Let's start from the beginning. Evergreen Heights looked like the perfect neighborhood, a picturesque suburban community with towering oak trees lining the streets, lush green lawns trimmed to perfection, and an unspoken rule that everything must remain just the way it had always been. It was a place where the houses were elegant, the driveways spotless, and the residents carefully selected through a mix of wealth, social status, and an unspoken expectation of conformity. To Margaret Whitmore, the president of the Homeowners Association, maintaining this illusion of perfection was her life's mission. A woman in her late 50s with sharp blue eyes and an air of self-importance, Margaret ruled the community with an iron fist, hidden beneath the soft cashmere of her designer sweaters. She had lived in Evergreen Heights for over 20 years and had been HOA president for the last 10. In that time, she had made sure that every homeowner followed the rules, her rules. So when David and Angela Johnson moved in, Margaret took it as a personal offense. The Johnsons were different. A young black couple in their mid-30s, both well-educated professionals, had purchased a beautiful 2-story home at the end of the cul-de-sac. David was a successful software engineer, and Angela was a respected civil rights attorney. They had 2 children, Noah, age 8, and Ava, age 5, who loved playing outside and riding their bikes along the sidewalk. From the moment they arrived, Margaret had been watching. At first, she had sent them a welcome package that included a thick rule book detailing every HOA regulation. Next, she issued subtle warnings, reminders that their front garden should adhere to HOA aesthetic guidelines, notices about trash bins being placed too far from the curb, complaints about the unsightly basketball hoop in their driveway. The Johnsons quickly realized they were being singled out. But the real attack came in the form of an official HOA letter. David stood at the kitchen counter, gripping the envelope in his hand. His jaw was tight, his knuckles white as he scanned the bolded words at the top of the page. Notice of HOA violations and eviction warning. Angela, standing beside him, snatched the letter and began reading aloud. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, it has come to the attention of the Homeowners Association that your property is in violation of multiple community standards. The following infractions have been noted. Unauthorized exterior modifications. Violation of aesthetic guidelines. Failure to maintain property in accordance with HOA regulations. Due to repeated noncompliance and refusal to adhere to the agreed-upon community rules, you are hereby given 30 days to vacate the premises before legal action is pursued. Failure to comply will result in formal eviction proceedings. Sincerely, Margaret Whitmore, HOA President. Angela's hands trembled as she finished reading. She's actually trying to evict us? David's nostrils flared. Over what? A damn basketball hoop? A flower bed? Angela shook her head. It's not about the violations, David. It never was. A heavy silence fell between them. David exhaled sharply, placing both hands on the counter. She doesn't want us here. Angela met his gaze, her brown eyes burning with determination. Then we make sure we stay. That evening, as their children slept upstairs, David and Angela sat at the dining table, reviewing every HOA document they had received since moving in. Angela, with her legal expertise, dissected each claim, searching for loopholes, inconsistencies, anything she could use to fight back. "This is discrimination," she muttered, flipping through the pages. "Selective enforcement. There's no way she's hitting other homeowners with these same violations." David nodded, rubbing his temple. "I bet our neighbors have plenty of violations, but they aren't getting threats." Angela's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we need proof." The next day, while David took the kids to the park, Angela walked around the neighborhood, casually taking note of every visible HOA violation she could find. Mailboxes of varying styles, driveways with visible cracks, unapproved exterior paint colors, even another basketball hoop 2 houses down. She documented everything with photos, timestamps, and notes. And then, as if sensing the threat, Margaret herself appeared. Angela was standing outside, reviewing her notes, when she spotted Margaret approaching. The older woman strode up the driveway in a crisp white blouse and beige slacks, her expression unreadable. "I assume you received my letter," Margaret said coolly. Angela crossed her arms. "Oh, we did." Margaret sighed, as if speaking to a child who refused to follow instructions. "You have 30 days. I suggest you start packing." Angela let out a short, humorless laugh. "You must be joking." Margaret's expression remained unchanged. "I'm very serious. This neighborhood has standards, and I will not allow those standards to be compromised." Angela's jaw clenched. "What standards, exactly? Because I've noticed plenty of other homeowners with violations you seem to have overlooked." Margaret's smile was thin. "We enforce our rules fairly." Angela took a step closer. "Then why are we the only ones receiving an eviction notice?" Margaret's gaze flickered just for a second, a moment of hesitation. Then she straightened. "I don't need to explain myself. The HOA has made its decision. If you refuse to comply, you'll face legal consequences." Angela's eyes narrowed. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." Margaret's smug demeanor faltered. "Excuse me?" Angela tilted her head slightly. "You seem to think we're just going to roll over and let you push us out. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Margaret's eyes darkened. "Do what you want. It won't matter." Angela simply smiled. "Oh, I think it will." Margaret turned sharply on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement. Angela watched her go, feeling her pulse pounding in her ears. David stepped out onto the porch, having returned just in time to catch the end of the conversation. "What did she want?" Angela exhaled slowly. "She's giving us 30 days. David scoffed. "Like hell she is." Angela looked up at him, her determination unwavering. "We're not just fighting for our home, David. We're making sure she never does this to anyone else again." David reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "She has no idea what's coming." Angela sat at the dining table, her laptop open, the screen illuminated with a spreadsheet full of HOA violations. She had spent the past few nights compiling evidence, photographs, timestamps, official HOA documentation, all proving what she already knew. Margaret Whitmore was selectively enforcing rules, and it wasn't just them. She had reached out to a few other homeowners, people of color, single parents, and even an elderly couple, who had also faced harassment from Margaret. Every story followed a pattern: bogus violations, excessive fines, aggressive threats of legal action. The more Angela uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just an isolated case. This was systemic. But Margaret had made a fatal mistake. She had tried to bully the wrong people. David entered the room, rubbing his temples. "I just got another letter from them. Now they're saying we owe over $3,500 in HOA fines." Angela barely looked up. "They're escalating because they know they don't have a case." David sat across from her, running a hand over his face. "I don't get it. We pay our dues. We maintain the house. What does she want from us?" Angela's fingers hovered over her keyboard. "She wants us gone." She clicked a folder open. "But that's not happening." David leaned forward. So, what's our next move? Angela smiled. We go on the offensive. Checked. The HOA's next attack. The next morning, a contractor pulled up to their house in a white van. A stocky man with a clipboard stepped out, glancing around as if surveying the property. David, who had been drinking coffee on the porch, frowned and walked over. Can I help you? The contractor adjusted his hat. Yeah, I've got a work order from the HOA. Says I'm here to conduct a mandatory inspection. David's stomach twisted. Inspection for what? The man shrugged. Just following orders. Angela appeared at the doorway, arms crossed. No, you're not. The contractor glanced between them. Look, lady, I don't want any trouble. I was told... Angela stepped forward. I don't care what you were told. You step onto this property without a court order and I'll have you arrested for trespassing. The contractor hesitated. Listen, Angela pulled out her phone. I'll call the cops right now. That did it. The man threw up his hands and walked back to his van. Not worth the headache, he muttered before driving away. David turned to Angela. They're desperate. Angela nodded, which means we're close to breaking them. Margaret's final warning. That evening, just before sunset, Margaret arrived. She was alone, dressed in a perfectly tailored white blouse and beige slacks, her blonde hair pinned in a tight bun. She walked up the driveway with an air of quiet authority, stopping just a few feet from the porch. Angela stepped outside to meet her, her arms crossed. Brave of you to come alone, Margaret exhaled. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Angela tilted her head. Am I? Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. You have 25 days left. If you refuse to leave, you will be in breach of HOA bylaws. At that point, I will involve attorneys. Angela let out a short laugh. Oh, Margaret, you really don't know who you're dealing with, do you? Margaret's eyes narrowed. Angela leaned in slightly. Let me tell you what I found. She pulled out a folder. 15 other homeowners, all with violations that somehow never made it to the HOA's fine list. She smirked. But you did fine every black homeowner in this neighborhood, didn't you? Margaret's jaw tightened. Angela continued. And this? A letter from a former board member who claims you personally ordered violations against undesirable homeowners. Margaret's breath hitched. Angela took another step forward, lowering her voice. You're not running an HOA, Margaret. You're running a harassment campaign. Margaret forced a smile. You don't have proof. Angela handed her a paper. That's where you're wrong. I have everything I need. And tomorrow morning, this is going straight to my lawyer. Margaret's smile disappeared. Angela tilted her head. You feel that, Margaret? That's panic. That's the feeling of knowing you just lost. Margaret stepped back. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Angela smirked. I really do. Without another word, Margaret turned on her heel and walked away. Angela watched her go, heart pounding. David stepped onto the porch. How bad? Angela looked at him, her eyes blazing. She's scared. David exhaled. Good. Angela nodded. Next stop, court.